Hey everybody, and welcome back to Sammy's Stories. Today we got a crazy story from r/EntitledParents where OP encounters two entitled mothers trying to steal her son's wheelchair on the same day. I have a 10-year-old son. He is a semi-ambulant wheelchair user and he has a medical condition that makes walking difficult, and the older he gets, the more difficult it becomes. He can walk short distances, 10 to 12 steps, but then it starts to get painful, so he uses a scoot board, think a square skateboard with caster wheels on each corner, to get around the house, and a wheelchair outside of the house. He does need his chair. Even though he can stand and walk, he is very independent. Nothing is holding him back. He is also very social. He loves talking to his specialists and knows all the nurses by name and even their pets' names. He is also well known in our local area. The employees in the shops all know him. He talks to everyone. Before I start this story, I should add that his wheelchair is not a standard hospital grey wheelchair. It is electric blue, has Pokemon wheel covers, and his rain guards / armrests have stickers of animals on them. The armrests flip up, so he has access to the wheels, and they look like wings behind his chair. It is very much modified and personalized. It isn't a grey stock standard chair. So today we had our monthly pediatrician's appointment. We've been seeing the same pediatrician since birth, so he's like a family friend now. A few days ago, luckily at night, during a storm, a tree branch fell onto the building and took out some windows and caused some water damage, and they've been doing some repair work. So this pediatrics normal office was unusable and they had converted another space to use. But this meant going up 5 steps. Our pediatrician is a late 30s, early 40s, chilled out surfer dude with long hair. He came out to the waiting room and told my son about the room change and that he had to tackle some stairs today. Or he could have a piggyback ride. Of course my son chose the piggyback, with a giggle. After checking with me that it was okay, he scooped him up and off they went. So I parked his wheelchair out of the way against the wall in the waiting room, and followed them in. After his appointment, my son was piggybacked out to the waiting room and our pediatrician popped him on a chair and left to speak with the receptionist. I looked around and his wheelchair was gone. I walked around the corner of the waiting room and there was a child, about 8ish, wheeling himself around in it. I know, wheelchairs are a fascination to kids, and I really didn't mind that he was having a wheel around in it. I find it helps with education and acceptance of kids with disabilities and how much of a harder life it is sometimes, even if wheelchairs are fun. I walked over to him and asked him if he had fun wheeling himself around. The child said that he had, and I told him it was my son's wheelchair and I needed it back now so I could take my son home. He jumped straight out of the chair, smiled at me, and said thanks and wheeled it towards my son. All was good until the screech happened.
What are you doing? That is my son's wheelchair. He was riding in that.
Actually, it's my son.
No, it isn't. My son saw it first.
At this point, my son stood up and walked a few steps towards me. He was getting concerned. This doesn't belong to the practice. I purchased it for my son. It's his.
No, you didn't. He doesn't even need a wheelchair. He can walk.
She then turns the wheelchair towards her, but I held onto the handles firmly. I told my son to go sit back down, as I saw this wasn't going to be a quick enough fix for him to keep standing. Please stop yelling at me. This is my son's wheelchair. I have hundreds of photos of him in it on my phone. See? I opened the Phones app on my phone and showed her photos of him in the chair with the flywheel attached.
Pfft, that's a different chair. This doesn't have that thing on the front.
She pulled the chair towards her. That thing is his bicycle hand crank attachment that allows him to go fast on the bike track like the other kids. It attaches here using these attachments. I point to the attachments. If you look at the chair in this picture, it has the Pokemon wheel covers just like this one, see? This is his chair, and I pull the chair back towards me.
No, it isn't. Why can't you wait your turn? Give it back.
At this point, the pediatrician comes back from speaking with the receptionist, and the entitled mother tries to involve him in the discussion. He ignores her and silently takes the chair from me, walks it around entitled mother, scoops up my son, and settles him in his chair. He then turns to the entitled mother and says, "That is Billy's chair. It belongs to him, not the practice. You can't have it. We don't accept stealing, and the welfare of our existing patients is our focus. Your actions today are contrary to acceptable behavior in this practice. We have decided not to accept your family to the practice. Please leave." Entitled mother screamed, shouted at me about how I had cost her an appointment with my lies and how it wasn't fair. Our pediatrician just put both arms out to his sides, think big stretching arms forming a T-shape with his body, and stood between her and us, and repeated for her to leave. There will be no further discussion, and that she wouldn't be seen today or any other day. She huffed, grabbed her very embarrassed looking child's hand, and left. Our pediatrician was very apologetic, but honestly he couldn't have done a better job in dealing with the entitled mother. He reached over the counter, grabbed a lollipop, and gave it to my son. He told me there would be no out-of-pocket payments for us today and to just make an appointment for next month. He is an awesome pediatrician and human. What a great guy. I think working in pediatrics is a very noble job and must be quite difficult considering you have to deal with these entitled mothers like that all the time. I don't see how the entitled mother thought that she could get away with an argument like that. If it were a boring grey wheelchair, one would be forgiven for thinking it was the property of the clinic. But even then, her child could clearly walk normal and didn't need it. It is not a toy, yet she seems to think so. And I feel really bad for her child. He seemed very kind and understanding and has to grow up influenced by this deranged woman. What a shame. But, as the title suggests, OP encountered not one, but two entitled mothers. We drove the hour and a bit home to our smallish town and stopped at the supermarket to grab some groceries. My son likes to zoom around the supermarket, getting items and bringing them back to me before zooming off again to the next item on the list. He knows all the staff and they all talk to him, direct him where he needs to find his items, and they talk about their pets with him because he is a huge animal lover. It is a social outing for him. So I usually start at the front of the store and make my way through the aisles, while my zoomer goes and gets random stuff. We were doing our usual thing and he didn't come back. Personally, I didn't think much of it, because the staff will often steal him away to the bakery for broken biscuits or an extra donut they can't fit in a package. As I rounded the corner of the next aisle, I see my son at the other end of the aisle, standing while holding onto a shelf and a nearby child sitting in his wheelchair. From the way he is standing, I can tell my son is in pain, and he is talking to the child, and entitled mother is talking to my son as well. I can see she is getting animated, but from the other end of the aisle I can't hear what they are saying. I hurried up the aisle and took a hold of my son from the shelf. He's crying, and he tells me that the kid won't get out of his chair and the entitled mother won't make a move. "Honey, can you hop out of my son's chair? He's in a lot of pain and he needs to get back into it." My son has started to shake, and I know he is in quite a bit of pain and his legs will soon just give out from under him, so I lower him to the floor.
No, he won't. He's having a turn. Your bratty kid wouldn't even let him go up and down the aisle more than once before asking him back. My son has a sore ankle, and I'm going to tell the manager we need it more than you.
Wait, what? This isn't the higher chair, it's my son's chair.
Don't be ridiculous. I see that chair all the time being used by kids.
You may see the chair in here a lot because my son and I come here a lot for our groceries, but it's his chair.
No, it isn't. It's the store's, and every time I come in, a different kid is using it.
You are mistaken. This is my son's chair. I have photos of him in it. He needs it back. I open my phone and try to find a picture of my son without the flywheel attachment to avoid the same discussion as the morning. No, we're taking it. And off she goes, wheeling her son away. My son lets out a full-on wail that is a combination of pain and distress that his wheels are leaving.
I run the few steps after her and grab out at the chair and firmly say, "No! You are not taking my son's chair!" The wail and my shouting has employees popping out from the aisles, and the manager comes quickly from the service desk area. Entitled mother tries to preempt the discussion and yells at the manager my son has had the chair long enough and that her son has a sore ankle, so he needs it more. And they should buy more higher chairs so that there's more available to shoppers. I was standing back a little from them, because once the manager arrived, I knew he would deal with it, and I needed to check on my son down the aisle on the floor, crying. I was trying to calm him from a distance by letting him know I wasn't far away, while not letting a $4,500 wheelchair out of my sight. The manager looks at me, looks at her, looks back at me, with this look of like, "What the hell?" on his face, and asks where is my son. I point and tell him down the aisle on the floor. With a look of horror, he asks if they had tipped him out of his chair. I said I don't know exactly what happened. He was there standing holding a shelf when I found him. He turns around and almost roars at this woman to get her son out of a disabled person's wheelchair so we can get him off the floor. It doesn't belong to the store. They don't hire wheelchairs here. The poor child was trying to get out of the chair, and the entitled mother kept pushing him back down into the chair, telling him that he needs it. The child is nearly in tears and getting very upset. Meanwhile, 2 staff members have found my son and are now sitting on the floor with him, holding his hand and drying his tears. The manager is losing his mind, whilst trying to be professional, but I can see he is in disbelief at this woman's stupidity. Then the troops arrive. In the background, I see an employee with 2 police officers in tow. It looks like they were on a break and were grabbing things to eat. The entitled mother turned and was all relieved that the police were there to sort out this manager and started on with her wailing story. The policewoman shushed the entitled mother and spoke with the manager, who explained that my son and I were regular customers. He knew us and this was my son's wheelchair, but entitled mother insisted it was a hired chair. My son was currently sitting on the floor in the next aisle, and entitled mother wouldn't let her son get out of his chair and insisted he used it. The male officer walked forward and looked down the aisle at my son and nodded at his partner. The female officer very firmly told the entitled mother to get a child out of my son's chair immediately or she would be arrested for theft. Her child tried again to get out of the chair and she pushed him back again. The officer pulled the wheelchair back and asked the child to hop out, and he immediately did. The entitled mother wailed. The officer then turned the wheelchair around to the male officer, who walked down the aisle with it. I don't know exactly what happened next, as I was getting my son back into his chair and calming him down. The assistant manager took us back to the manager's office so he had a quiet space. She got my son some water so he could have pain medication, and in about 20 minutes he was fine. He told us that he had stood up and walked 2 steps forward to get something off a higher shelf, and the other child had jumped into his wheelchair and asked if he could ride it up and down the aisle and back. My son said sure, thinking that this kid would just go up and back and he could get back in, but entitled mother wouldn't let that happen. He started to cry again, and I told him he was very kind to the little boy and to not let an entitled mother ruin his day. After a while, the manager came into the office and said that the woman had been banned from the store. The officers had escorted her out and he had issued her with the ban paperwork. He said that she had been causing trouble in the store for a while with her Karen-ness and were glad to see the back of her. He apologized profusely for what happened. While we left his office, we found that our shopping was all bagged up and ready for us to go. They had taken my shopping list from the trolley, finished my shopping, and checked it out at no charge and bagged it all up ready for us. When we got home, there were a few extra treats in the bags for my son. The icing on the cake is that our town only has 1 supermarket. The entitled mother now has to drive 45 minutes to the next town to shop. I hope this teaches her a lesson, though I suspect probably not. It's always so satisfying to read the stories where the entitled mothers get their comeuppance. But I again feel so bad for that kid that just wanted to ride up and down the aisle quickly and then was forced by his mother to stay in the wheelchair. Why do people like that exist, that can take a moment of pure kindness and destroy every part of it with their entitlement? That poor kid crying while being forced to stay in the chair must have a hard time at home, and I feel for him and all the innocent kids that are forced to live with parents like that.
Man, OP's son though has a heart of gold. It's not easy to find so much joy and positivity in life when put in such a situation, but this kid seems to be just beaming with it. Such a shame that some people just want to watch the world burn just so they can keep warm. Do you guys agree with how OP handled the situation, or would you have remained less calm? Let me know down in the comments. We hope you liked the video and would love a subscribe if you did. And I'll be back in the next one. See ya!